Welcome to the Temple of the Living Fire. This episode is what we'll call a bonus episode. From time to time, we will present astrological forecasts. Today, we would like to explore the thoughts of Magus Incognito on the astrology of the United States, current planetary cycles, and the upcoming election.
Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kybalion. Dear unknown friend, the preceding came to mind today as I meditated upon the current transits of the outer planets, which play such a profound role in influencing the waxing and waning, the movement from stability to entropy, order to chaos, anabolic to catabolic, or the ebb and flow of collective changes in humanity, as its conscious aspect is affected by its unconscious aspect. It is with this understanding that we can embark on a journey with an aim of gaining insight into our current times and hopefully attaining a broader, deeper and more holistic perspective. It is in this spirit that I will examine the upcoming election and the astrological influences affecting it. While I have made a thorough examination of the charts of the respective candidates as well, it is the national chart I will focus on for the moment, as I've found this more telling. There is a need to go into a little background, as the current planetary cycles are repeats of cycles that have shown themselves in the past to be extremely dynamic in their effect on collective destiny of the United States and the world. There are, in fact, 4 outer planetary cycles currently of great importance. These would be the cycles of Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Chiron. All of these celestial bodies have returned to, or are nearing a return to, places they had occupied during the most dramatic and perhaps cathartic periods in American history. I will go into far greater study of these cycles after the election, but for today I would like to address these cycles only in overview. Pluto is the first I would like to consider. This planet being the prime driver of evolutionary impulses and impetus, and hence possibly the most important. Pluto is positioned at 27 degrees of Capricorn in the American natal chart, using a birthday of July 4th, 1776. As the revolutionary period unfolded, Pluto entered into Aquarius, and this was significant in light of the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, and it ultimately meant the end of monarchical forms of government, and the beginning of new concepts for governance, democracy, socialism, communism, republicanism, as well as ideals like liberty, freedom, universal equality for every man. These can all be considered archetypally as Aquarian systems of thought. Also contributing to this emancipatory zeitgeist of the late 18th century was the planet Uranus, which, thanks to the invention of the telescope, was discovered during this period. Uranus was positioned at 8 degrees of Gemini at the time of the Declaration of Independence, and had hence been in a trine relationship to Pluto, much like today. We should also take note of the fact that at that time, Pluto occupied the sign that Uranus has rulership over, Aquarius. This powerful geometric relationship between these two celestial bodies created a spirit of revolution in thought, as already mentioned. And as Uranus approached Leo and entered into opposition with Pluto, we saw an augmentation of the spirit of rebellion, sudden upheaval, chaos, a desire for sexual liberation, and even violence. I want to mention here that the astrologer Jungian, professor of philosophy and psychology, Richard Tarnas, did remarkable work in his book Cosmos and Psyche on another aspect of this same cultural epoch. His focus was on the synodic cycles between planets as opposed to their positions in the zodiac. This means to say, their conjunctions and subsequent movements in relation to each other, with a focus on their hard aspects, the square and opposition, or 90-degree and 180-degree angles, respectively. His work on the Pluto-Uranus cycle is especially illuminating and echoes the archetypal idea of Pluto in Aquarius. Once again, these planets in interaction, taken on their own, without regard to the particular sphere of the zodiac they are placed in, when configured in certain dynamic aspects to each other, are correlated to periods of great cultural upheaval. The mid-1960s is one such example, this being the Pluto and Uranus conjunction. Taken from Wikipedia, it says, Tarnas further observed that a Uranus-Pluto opposition occurred during the French Revolution. Like the 1960s, the French Revolution featured the characteristics of Uranus-Pluto alignment. Revolution through the manifestation of the suppressed. These historical astrological coincidences or synchronicities led Tarnas to further explore the relationship of pivotal moments in Western cultural history to the conjunctions, oppositions, and squares of the outer planets. The historical events analyzed include the Reformation, the Renaissance, Romanticism, the Scientific Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, Modernism, Postmodernism, etc. End quote. As an aside, let me mention before proceeding, large planetary bodies in hard aspect, alignments, conjunctions, squares, and oppositions have been shown to have direct correspondence to the solar cycles. I will leave that topic for another time, but it is quite curious that this happens. Now, Tarnas speaks of the powerfully Dionysian character of Pluto and the illuminating Promethean character of Uranus, which in combination appear to be connected to periods where there is a certain spirit in the air, rebellion against the establishment or ancient regime. A tsunami of feelings of discontentment, compulsion, and aggressive assertions of desired liberties, for better or worse, such manifestations out of the collective unconscious seem very prevalent in such periods. The other book I would like to mention is The Fourth Turning, by the generational theorists William Strauss and Neil Howe. These men found there to be something of a cyclic nature that produced periods of relative stability, contentment, trust in institutions and societal norms, and other periods of great upheaval, change, and revolt. Their work correlates well to the study of these same astrological cycles. Their thesis, simplified, is that great stability creates an urge to tear down barriers, reform institutions, and place a higher value on the individual self-discovery and individual expression. And that such times, known as consciousness revolutions or movements, inevitably lead to cultural, social, and economic entropy that creates a crisis lasting 10 to 25 years typically, which then in turn produce periods of greater stability and greater social cohesion. The crisis periods are called fourth turnings and take place approximately every 84 years, curiously the length of a Uranian year. The return to relative stability is called a first turning. Strauss and Howe predicted in the 1990s that a period of cultural crisis was coming to the United States in the mid-2000s, another fourth turning. This period also being the beginning of the Pluto return for the United States. Speaking of this return, it reached its exactitude in February of 2022, within days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There are two major events connected to this return of Pluto to Capricorn. The first is the Great Recession, as Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008. The second, the invasion of Ukraine, and arguably there is a third, the COVID pandemic. But the astrology of pandemics is a complex topic that will perhaps be part of another episode. So let me not digress. The major theme of Pluto transiting through the sign of Capricorn has been corruption in our institutions coming to the light of day, especially financial institutions. This is due to the fact that Capricorn occupies the second house of the United States, and it directly concerns our banking, trade relationships, and currency. It is, however, currency that is especially significant, and the position the US has enjoyed for many years of having the dollar or petrodollar serve as the world global reserve currency. This status of the dollar, in keeping with Plutonian themes, has frequently been weaponized against other nations. This is coming to an end, slowly but surely, and Russia's invasion and the increasing power of BRICS are all sure signs of the inevitable displacement of America as the sole global power. So what I have mentioned thus far is to help form a general picture of our own time and its similitude to previous historical epochs. There will be a second episode on this after the election, where I will deal with Neptune, which is returning to its civil war position, and Chiron, which has returned to Aries for the fourth time since 1776. As for the upcoming election, I feel the astrological factors are as even as the poles. This was not the case when Biden was running, but many elements of the current transits both help and hinder each of the two candidates in similar ways. Trump is a Gemini and Harris has Gemini on her ascendant, is one such example. Jupiter is currently a great aid to both. However, I feel the election will see Uranus and Chiron as the greater influences, and these planets are currently affecting two houses in the American natal chart. The fourth house, which in the context of a nation's chart concerns borders and cultural identity, has Chiron transiting through it, and the sixth house, which concerns the working class and health issues, is occupied by Uranus. There is a lot that suggests social political perspectives are shifting, realigning, and recapitulating. Now, Chiron, as it transits through Aries, has a special relationship to the founding of the nation, and the nation has been experiencing its fourth Chiron return since 1776. This planet has been in Aries recently, and this transit has a strong influence on Generation X, or the 13th generation, a generation which has shifted a bit politically, away from the Democratic Party. A generation that has a very different perspective than the preceding generation that has been in power and shaped our modern culture most profoundly, the baby boomers. With the preceding facts in mind, I would say Trump has the ever so slight edge in this election, albeit he will be experiencing great adversity with Pluto approaching opposition to his ascendant. However, it is such conflict and dialectic that can bring about the necessary synthesis in culture in the long term. Harris would not be so hindered by Pluto's influence. These times are indeed times of crisis, and there will be many twists and turns ahead before greater cultural cohesion manifests again. Whoever wins will preside over great difficulty between 2025 and 2033. Civil war, world war, possibilities of secession, economic depression, questions about keeping currency anchored to reality via the gold standard or something similar. If history tells us anything, the pendulum can swing widely at such times. In revolutionary France, the revolution brought about a tearing down of tradition and social norms, the Saturnian elements, and subsequently this led to social and economic chaos that was not brought to a halt until Napoleon, who, curiously, was a Leo figure, representing the polarity of the Pluto in Aquarius zeitgeist, and hence perhaps aided in restoring the balance that was needed at the time. The persecutions of Christians ceased, the church was restored, and France returned to the gold standard. One of the issues with the outer planets, commonly ignored by modern astrologers, who sometimes tend to look only at the awakening, transcendent, and liberating potentials of these outer planets, is their shadow aspect. As we saw in revolutionary France, those fighting for liberty and an age of reason became violently oppressive themselves. It has been said by Isabel Hickey that until the lessons of Saturn have been mastered, the influence of these outer planets tend to lead to licentiousness, libertine values, ideological possession, madness, and not true freedom, which is found through awakening to, or entering into self. I have personally seen that many people have difficulty when one of these trans-Saturnian planets has a tight aspect to the Moon, for example. In the case of Uranus-Moon conjunctions, the individual is often very much a free spirit, original and creative, but in some cases there is mental illness, or at least great instability mentally and emotionally, rashness and impulsiveness. This also applies to collective transits. One could say of the outer planets truly, those whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. As the anthroposophical astrologer, Dr. Robert Powell has said, The outer planets correspond to the 3 temptations of Christ in the wilderness. And in his view, which does seem to have some merit, humanity began a collective confrontation with these archetypal temptations with the onset of their discovery in the late 18th century. Uranus was the first of these to be discovered and corresponds to the temptation to turn these stones to bread, and is partly manifest in the guise of innovations in science and technology that are Ahrimanic in potential. That is, creating a more materialistic outlook, disenchantment, a mechanistic worldview, void of vital elan and disconnecting humanity from its I consciousness. Neptune corresponds with the temptation to cast oneself off the pinnacle of the temple into collectivism, materialism, and possession by instinctivity. Neptune was discovered 2 years before the Communist Manifesto was published and has recently returned to the same area of the zodiac. This philosophical outlook, while well-intended, had succumbed to the illusion of materialism and Maya. Now Pluto corresponds to the will to power or will to love, and the temptation to have power over all the kingdoms of the world. It was discovered when the atomic bomb was about to be developed and used. Humanity had never had such destructive power in its hands since Atlantis or the last Aquarian age. Powell's insights are intriguing and based on sound Hermetic thought. As much as these celestial bodies are liberating, awakening, there is a clipothic side to them, a shadow side that must be faced. They can facilitate awakening, epiphany, deep spiritual experiences, and equally they can allow the human being to become quite abstracted and disconnected, to fall into mass consciousness and ideological possession. A meditation on the Tower Arcanum of the Tarot is potentially very revealing of the character of Uranus, and we might look at this planet's effects and relationship to changes, like the World Wide Web, and consider both the positive and negative aspects of this change. The fact that there is an element of the Tower of Babel in our current zeitgeist contains some irony. The world now has a nervous system where all of human knowledge is accessible, where information moves faster than it ever has before, creating more global connectivity. And at the same time, there is the meaning crisis, a feeling of isolation, disconnection, and greater atomization of the human being. The recent work of Belgian psychologist Matthias Desmet and Carl Jung's Undiscovered Self both shine a light on important aspects of this very problem. Jung saw mass media as being a potent psychic danger, and Desmet has talked about mass media being an absolutely necessary component of a mass formation and totalitarian regimes. The wisdom of Christ Sophia is needed to cross this threshold we currently face and into higher consciousness. The lessons of both Saturn and Chiron prepare the individual for this evolutionary process. And, dear unknown friend, in such times as ours, which represent the entropic phase of these waxing and waning cycles, where there is heightened polarization collectively, remember such times are always preceding a birth of a new center of consciousness, a revitalizing, a regenerating. It does not matter if this is a personal cycle and experience or a collective one. Such times as ours call for the spirit of the Hermeticist and the spirit of the Hermit. And I've found this nowhere better articulated than in the work of Valentin Tomberg, in his Meditations on Tarot, A Journey into Christian Hermeticism. In his letter, entitled The Hermit, he writes, "The hermit is the spiritual image of he who follows the method and exercises the faculty of the gift of black perfection, or the gift of perfect night. As this method comprises true impartiality, i.e., the search for the synthesis of antinomies, and the third term of binaries, the Hermeticist must necessarily be solitary, i.e., a hermit. Solitude is the method itself of Hermeticism, for one has to be profoundly alone in order to be able to exercise the gift of perfect night in the face of contraries, binaries, antinomies, and parts which divide and rend the world of truth. He who seeks synthesis, i.e. true peace, can never take part for or against opposing things. And since it is precisely taking sides which groups people into communities and divides them into sections, he is necessarily alone. He can neither embrace any human cause without reservation, nor be opposed to any human cause, being loyal to the cause of truth, which is synthesis and peace. This is why he is condemned, whether he wants it or not, to profound solitude. He is a hermit in his inner life, whatever his outer life may be. He will never be given the joy of plunging himself in national, social, or political collectivity. He will never have the blissful experience of having shared out the weight of responsibility with the multitude, and he can never fit in at festivals or orgies, in the sense implied in the words "we French," "we Germans," "we Jews," "we Republicans," "we Royalists," or "we Communists." The intoxication of plunging into collectivity is not given to him. He must be sober, i.e. alone, because the pursuit of truth through synthesis, which is peace, implies prudence, and prudence is solitude. This is why the Gospel puts the peacemakers in the same list as those who are poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, and those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, assigning them another blessing than that of which they are deprived. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, is what is said in the Sermon on the Mount for those who refuse to take sides in the face of partial truths and prejudices, being dedicated to the cause of the whole truth which unites the world and bears peace to it. The itinerant hermit, with his mantle, his lamp, and his staff, is a traveling salesman of peace. He makes his way from opinion to opinion, from belief to belief, from experience to experience, and traces his route so that he traverses the way of peace between opinions, beliefs, and experiences, being always equipped with his mantle, lamp, and staff. He does so alone, because he walks, and no one can walk for him, and because his work is peace, which is prudence, and therefore solitude. End of quote. Indeed, there is such profound truth in these words, and the ninth arcanum represents synthesis of all that has preceded it. It is integration in preparation for a new phase of development. I will return to a deeper explanation of this subject in December. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and comment, and visit our website, templeofthelivingfire.com. Also, reach out to us through our website to receive help from our seasonal rituals, prayers, and pujas. I bid you peace, dear unknown friend. Namaste.